Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Lyon, the ARIA National Mortgage Chair. It is actually an honor for us to be here today with Dr. Lawrence Yun, the Chief Economist from NAR. We felt that in this time of uncertainty with increased interest rates as well as all this news of bank failures, we thought we would want Dr. Yun to come give us a little perspective on sort of what's happening in the market and what the forecast is for the rest of the year. Dr. Yun, are you there?
Hello, Gary.
Hey, how's it going? So thank you again for being here with us. I know that you have a lot of data to present to us. So in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to you very shortly, but I do want the attendees to know that we do have Dr. Yun here for a very limited time. We do have him only for about half an hour. So he's going to go through the whole presentation. And then the last 5 minutes, hopefully we'll have enough time for some questions and answers. And if there's any additional questions, we'll take that back to his team and email it out to everybody. So Dr. Yun, please take over.
Oh, yeah, great. I am not in my office. I am in Chicago. Our office will be in DC. Our headquarter office is in Chicago. We have some meetings that I have to attend to, but thank you for inviting. Always great to participate with the people who are members of ARIA, very important. I remember the very early years trying to start and now grown and still growing. So great to hear the power and the increasing numbers in the ARIA. Well, as Gary mentioned, the market situation is very interesting. And of course, last year, it was quite difficult for people in the housing industry, whether you were a mortgage lender, realtor, home builder, very tough year in 2022. Now, in the spring of this year, what can we anticipate? So let me put some data points and then share with that. So as an economist, I have to share so much data out there. So let's go from there. So let's first start with the Silicon Valley collapse and other regional bank collapse. So in terms of what was happening right before the collapse was that mortgage rates were actually hanging around at around 7%, that little box that I put. And on the day that the rumors of Silicon Valley Bank, long line set up, and then what's going to happen, the 10-year Treasury declined, consequently mortgage rate also declined. Well, today, 10-year Treasury is around 3.5%. which should translate into mortgage rate being a little lower right now or this week compared to pre-collapse. And the reasoning is very simple. Anytime there's a financial market uncertainty, people seek safety, whether it is gold, whether it is the US government bond, the safest asset in the whole world. You get a government bond, essentially you are guaranteed that interest, whatever they promise. Now, next level safety is mortgages with government guarantee. And we know that nearly 90% of the mortgages have some degree of government guarantee. Veterans Affairs Mortgage, FHA, and even Rocket Mortgage or mortgages originated by Bank of America eventually get sold to Fannie and Freddie. Fannie and Freddie is government guarantee. That's why the mortgage rates have been lower since the collapse. Now, this is not a good news for people in the Silicon Valley area, even though people are getting their deposit back, because the job creation in the region will be very difficult. Many of the technology startup, and I'm sure there are many Asian entrepreneurs who are involved in the startup, well, they're not going to be able to now get the cash to expand their business or meet the payroll, just because now is much more greater scrutiny about lending in the Bay Area from it. But for the rest of the country, people who just want to buy a house, mortgage rates are a little favorable now than before. Now, the Silicon Valley Bank, interestingly, they collapsed because they were actually investing in the safest asset, US government bond and mortgage-backed securities. But what they did not do was interest rate risk. Anytime interest rate changes, the value of the safe asset can change. So say they bought $1 million government bond. Well, the interest rate is high. Well, Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates, Well, the value of that asset is much lower. So if the people come to the bank saying, I want my money back, well, they have to sell some assets. They are selling at a loss. And now they were running into cash crunch situation. So right now, some of the regional bank, we don't know who could be next, but the big banks are not in trouble because big banks actually have to do something called regular stress tests. What happened to your balance sheet if the mortgage interest rate changes to this level? So the big banks regularly conduct stress tests, and they are saying, no, we are all fine. We are protected from interest rate changes. So it's the regional banks that are really potentially facing some bank runs or running out of money situation. I know many Asians also are involved in commercial real estate. Sometimes one could be very successful realtor selling properties, but then they said, well, what do I do with all this savings? And they put it into some commercial real estate together. But commercial real estate lending is actually coming from regional bank. So this is where I think for the holders of commercial office buildings, commercial retail buildings, where you have to refinance every 5, 7, 10 years, first, interest rate will be higher just because commercial loans generally don't have government guarantee. So that's one. And second, they may place additional restriction about who they lend to, or is the collateral value there? And they may be very scrutinizing over that. So to the degree that some are engaged in commercial real estate, whether it's a personal investment or actually doing some commercial property transactions, it's going to be a little more difficult since the collapse of some of the regional bank, and there could be even more collapse coming along. But not the residential. Residential government guarantee on mortgages looks to be actually silver lining, actually a little better mortgage rate condition than before. Let me turn to the housing market. This is the home sales change in 3 boxes. The first box is pre-COVID condition. In hindsight, very little changes. Then you see the COVID real estate boom after the lockdown ended. So once the lockdown ended, consumers were facing 3% mortgage rates, too good to pass up. So people took advantage of it. We had a real estate boom. Then last year, from the consecutive most aggressive interest rate hike by the Federal Reserve since the early 1980s led to steady decline in home sales. But look at the red bar at the very end. That is February. So February home sales compared to February before, it is down, but down only by 22% rather than 35%. So it was truly bleeding. So before an improvement can take place, we need to ensure the bleeding stops. So in a sense, less of a negative is trying to stop that bleeding before turning positive. So at least the February figure on home sales were less of a decline than before. Now, all the economic data is called something called seasonal adjustment patterns. And what I put here on this graph is the line is pre-COVID and post-COVID. So pre-COVID, very stable, no meaningful changes. Post-COVID, you see much wilder swing. For newly constructed home sales, 3 consecutive months of gains on a seasonally adjusted basis, again, implying stopping the bleeding. Pending contracts, 2 straight months of an increase. Again, you see the pre-COVID, very stable, post-COVID, wild swings. And existing home sales, which I just referred to, less of a decline. Less of a decline on a month-to-month basis means actually is an increase. And statistically, this was one of the strongest one single month increase compared to other occurrences in the past. But the prices are beginning to show some potential declines. Let me take a sip of water. Hold on 1 second. I am also slightly under the weather. People who know me may recognize my voice is not the same. Well, that's what it is. So pre-COVID, again, very stable prices, meaning that prices are rising. 3, 4, 5% compared to 1 year before. Then we had a huge run up in prices, but the most recently available data actually showed a price reduction. It was a decimal point reduction, but price reduction on a nationwide condition. But if we look at regionally, we are seeing variation. Midwest is the most affordable. Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Kansas City, still cranking out price gains. In the South, they have fast job growth. Whether Florida, Texas, fast job growth is leading to price gains. But the price declines are happening out in the West. I know many Asians are out in the West region, California, all the way to Seattle, Portland, Arizona. So the West region is undergoing some price decline, about 5% lower prices. People in San Francisco is actually telling me some of the upper end properties are actually down 15% from the peak compared to before. In the Northeast region, also more expensive, Boston, New York conditions. So expensive regions, more sensitive to changes in mortgage rates. So prices coming down, while the Midwest and the South more affordable, prices still cranking out some gains. Here is some information if you're a realtor that you may want to use. We are seeing a price negotiation occurring more frequently now as of mid-March. And it depends on the days on the market. I put 3 columns. First column is active listings. And naturally, longer the days on the market, larger price cuts. But middle column is pending contracts. So pending contracts has a larger price reduction than the active listing, which is implying that if you are an active listing and you want to get to the pending status, well, you have to do a little more price discount. Then you go to the last column, which is actual closings. So you figure, well, pending contracts, isn't that the closing price? And answer is no. Pending contracts has contingencies like home appraisals or home inspection, appraisal contingencies, and it may not come in as people expect, so it requires a second round of price negotiation. So by the time that you go to the closing table, you see a larger price discount, especially if it's a longer days on the market. It's a national statistics, so maybe it doesn't apply to, say, LA, or it doesn't apply to Northern Jersey, where Gary is from. But at least nationwide, you see it. It's common sense, but actual figures you may not have seen. So these are actual figures happening in mid-March. Now the prices, I mentioned, there's a little variation in price changes in the regions, West, Northeast region. But other area where prices are actually declining are places like Austin, Boise, Nashville, areas where jobs are still strong, but price increases have been so substantial that it's coming down. So here's 2 graphs. Top line is Austin, bottom line is Dallas, Texas. So if you're a homeowner, where do you want to be, in Dallas or in Austin? Well, you don't want to be in Austin if you only recently purchased. But if you purchased property, say 5 years ago or longer, you definitely are happier in Austin. So in a sense, this is implying that in the area that has substantial price gains, Boise, Salt Lake City, Denver, prices are coming down. Florida market still holding on even with the substantial price gains, but let's see what happens to Florida. But the job market in Florida is very, very solid condition. Now, as to the mortgage market, people are not defaulting because job market is strong. This is over the past 20 years. Middle of the graph shows the subprime lending foreclosure crisis. And the second circle that you see is COVID lockdown. But ever since the economy reopened, so many help wanted sign, people are finding job, and as people are finding job, they are paying their mortgages. So no concern on mortgage delinquency. Maybe like Silicon Valley, they will begin to see a little uptick in delinquency, but broadly speaking, it's not really happening. And furthermore, when we ask realtors, the most recent transaction you conducted, was it a distressed property sales, meaning foreclosure or short sales? and only 2% of the realtors indicated as such. Contrast this with back in 2010, when roughly 1/3 of property transactions were classified as distress. So right now, distressed property sales not really occurring. Inventories, still getting complaints from realtor members to say not enough homes for sale. If there was more listings out there, actually home sales can actually rise. But it's one thing that's limiting home sales is lack of inventory. Look at the blue line, which is from the multiple listing service. So only looking at existing home inventory. Today, it is about 1 million. Contrast that with 4 million homes on the market during the foreclosure crisis, or even 2 million homes on the market pre-COVID. So home sales are sluggish, yet we still don't have inventory, which means at least this will provide some support level for prices. Again, some local markets are undergoing price declines, Seattle, San Francisco, but we're not going to see a 30% price decline or 40% price crash just because we don't have enough inventory. Now, the red line is builders' inventory, including empty lot, homes still under construction. Interesting part is builder inventory has always been a non-factor in the broader inventory picture. But what is happening today is, as a consumer, as you are trying to show a property for a consumer, it's almost becoming equal chance of finding a newly constructed home as an existing inventory, just because inventory for existing homes are just not there. And from the builder's perspective, it would be one of their larger inventory situation now compared to before. And building activity is still sluggish because maybe the builders are saying, look, we have a lot of unsold inventory. So the blue line is historical average, and we see the builders who have been underproducing pre-COVID, and they were then trying to catch the COVID real estate boom. But in the past 6 months, they have gone under historical average again because of little uptick in the inventory situation. But this also means that don't expect any oversupply in overall housing inventory because builders are not overproducing. Therefore, we should not expect any oversupply situation for the greater housing market. This is a long-term housing start, single-family housing start. So I expanded the graph all the way to 1960 before most of us were born. In fact, Asian immigration really happened from the 1970s. But as you see on the chart, we had that little box you see towards the end, almost a decade of great underproduction. And we had slight above average during the COVID real estate boom, but that's a small uptick compared to how much underproduction there was. And now it's declining again. So again, to illustrate that don't expect any oversupply situation. In the meantime, multifamily housing starts are at a 40-year high. So there's large degree of apartment construction. I know that in some areas, like in LA, San Francisco, Seattle, or say New York suburbs, all condominium is very important, but still all this multifamily is not necessarily condominium. It is just purely apartments. So apartment construction at a 40-year high condition. So a lot of empty units will be coming onto the market. If you have a investment property collecting rents, expect more competition as more empty apartment units hit your marketplace. Let me now turn to the job market. So with each passing month, more job creation, and in fact, we are at a record high in terms of job creation. And consequently, unemployment rate is very low. Many Asians are small business owners. I'm sure there's help wanted sign. It's really hard to find and qualify, decent workers because we have an exceptionally low unemployment rate. But one cause of this unemployment rate is we have this elevated level of people who are out of the labor force. Essentially, people who don't have a job, but they're not even searching for a job. There are just 3 million people who are out of the labor force. So this is really making it difficult for small business owners to hire new workers, Amazon will get their workers. If Amazon needs it, they're going to raise wages. But for small business owners, it's more difficult to raise wages to offer. So it's this elevated number of people who are completely out of the labor force, making it difficult for small business owner to hire workers. State by state variation in jobs. Some of you may have seen this graph before, but I update it every single month. So this is as of February of this year. February of this year versus March 2020, right before COVID. Right before COVID, every state essentially had high employment, record high employment. So I'm comparing pre-COVID record high employment versus the latest. Let's go to Florida. Easy to find. It's showing 7.5%. That means in Florida, there is 7.5% more people working in Florida today versus pre-COVID. Texas, 7.2%, also doing well. But California is only mildly positive, or say New Jersey is only mildly positive, just light blue colors. So light blue is trailing behind rest of the country. Dark blue is good, light blue, slightly positive. If you see orange color, peach color like New York State, this is bad news. You have not even fully recovered yet. So little variation across the country in terms of the job market performance, which impacts, especially as mortgage rates stabilize, it's all will be about the jobs, which will determine the housing demand. Now, the Federal Reserve, I think, will stop raising interest rates, hopefully, because you had the community banks, regional banks going bankrupt, and also inflation is beginning to show signs of calming, or at least it will show signs of calming for the simple reason of this. One of the big contributors to inflation right now is rents. So according to consumer price inflation, they are saying rents are rising 9% from 1 year before. You may be actually able to say, yeah, I'm actually collecting 9% higher rents. But many apartment buildings with so many empty units coming onto the market, they're actually beginning to slash rents. So like in New York City, they are actually saying that rents today are actually lower compared to 1 year before in the private sector data, not the government data. So there could be some lag in the government data. This includes single family rentals as well. So I think the rents simply cannot rise this strongly if we have so many new apartments construction happening. So I think eventually this will begin to calm down, which means overall inflation will calm down. So rents, in the middle, rising 9%. People are complaining about egg prices, but eggs are less than 1% of our budget. Rents are 30% of our budget. So the rent is the heavyweight. So as soon as rents come down, overall CPI will come down, irrespective of the price of eggs. So expect that situation to occur. So again, multifamily unit apartment building is essentially at a 40-year high. Let me also show you this graph. This is two graphs. Blue line is the 10-year Treasury yield. Any mortgage lender will know they constantly monitor 10-year Treasury yield because mortgage rates are priced off that. And the red line is the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Two lines move very similarly together, and there is a reasoning for that. 90% of the mortgages in America are government guaranteed. So if the Treasury, which is government, they are offering certain interest rate, well, government guarantee should be moving in a similar pattern. But if you look at this graph under a microscope, something strange is happening. The spread between those two lines, it is huge today, 310 basis points. Historical average is only 170 basis points. Remember at the very beginning of this presentation, some of you came late, you may want to rewind the tape and review it. So today's 10-year Treasury yield is 3.5%. If we had normal spread, mortgage rate today could be at 5.5% rather than 6.5%. That's going to open up the gate for more home buyers to reach the market. So if we have even just a normal spread, then we can get even lower rates. Now, without going into all the technical discussion, are we going to get normal spread or not? Only thing I can say is that anytime there was an abnormal spread, after 6 months, after 8 months, it disappears. Because if you are an investor of, say, Veterans Affairs Mortgage FHA, you say, well, if they miss their mortgage payment, government's going to still pay me. So it's a government guarantee. And therefore, there's a natural financial incentive to invest in mortgage-backed securities. So after several months, the spread should go back to normal. And consequently, I'm going to make this forecast. By year end, I think the mortgage rate today is around 6.5. I think it's going to be 5.5 by year end. And there's two reasons. One, removing the spread or spread naturally disappears. And the second reason is inflation will be much calmer because rents will be calmer. Remember the very robust apartment building. So once the rents come down, inflation will be calmer. So I think there is a distinct chance that the Federal Reserve will actually cut interest rate by the year end. And the market will price in this information that the Fed will be cutting interest rates. So I think there is a very good chance that the mortgage rate will be at 5.5%. This just means more potential buyers and also home sellers who say they don't want to give up their 3%. So if the interest rate is 7%, certainly they don't want to give it up. But some home sellers may say, well, now we have additional child in the family. I know mortgage rate is not 3%, but I need a larger size home. So 5.5% will make it a little easier for people to consider selling their home, but not sell their home at 7%. So I think this will be really good news in moving the market as mortgage rate begin to decline, and that's my expectations. But there are some risks. Let me actually go into the big risk, which is the national debt level very high. Remember, I talked about the spread. Well, if the government borrowing rate rises, and government borrowing rate could rise. You talk about the BRIC countries, the Brazil, Russia, India, China. If they get together and say, look, we're not interested in the dollar anymore, let's try to do transaction outside of the dollar, then it's going to make the US interest rate a little higher. So this high national debt could actually raise the 10-year treasury yield. So you can reduce the spread, but even if you reduce the spread, if the government borrowing rate is higher, mortgage rate will be higher. So that will be one sort of unknown risk, because they always talk about trying to dethrone the dollar. Discussion always takes place, but the reality, they can never dethrone the dollar because of the trust people place in the dollar. So thank you for giving me some time to share my view. I promise 5 minutes of question and answers. I can go for 5 minutes on Q&A. So thank you very much.
Dr. Yin, thank you so much. That was actually a lot of data and obviously very relevant to our jobs. So there is actually one question in the chat right now, and it's regarding the Federal Housing Finance Agency's loan level pricing adjustments that came into effect ever since January 16th. So with the combination of increased interest rates as well as increase in mortgage origination fees, how do you see that trending in the future, and how do you think it's going to affect the residential market?
Yeah, I mean, for first, the loan level price adjustment, they're raising it. But at the same time, FHA, which NAR has been constantly lobbying to say that FHA premiums are too high. Look at your reserve fund. FHA reserve fund is huge, far in excess of the government requirements. So there's an opportunity to cut FHA insurance premium. And I think they will soon be doing that. They announced it. I think implementation is coming up very soon. But the Fannie and Freddie is doing exactly the opposite. I mean, the mortgage default rate is so low. Maybe they're trying to plan ahead for potential default rate, but defaults happen when there's a price crash, and prices are not crashing nationwide. Fannie and Freddie has exposure in San Francisco, but they have exposure in Indianapolis, Kansas City. So as they are looking at the broader, their portfolio, I mean, they're in a very minimal risk situation. So it doesn't make sense why they are trying to raise the loan level pricing adjustment. And certainly that is something that NAR is also communicating with the FHFA, Fannie and Freddie. or even to the government, members of Congress to
Yeah.
see if they could apply some pressure.
Yeah, I think the biggest LLPA that every originator had a problem with was the DTI adjustment. But I think, I think Pauline Lee just said in the chat that it's currently on hold. So that was a very big sort of point of contention that the MBA had sent a letter out. So we have two more questions. If you can't get to them, that's fine. One of them comes from Jeremy Smith. It goes, can you speak to the reason for the wider gap in spreads? What causes them and what will bring them back down? I'm not too sure if he means the spreads as far as between the 10-year. Is that what you're referring to, Jeremy?
Yeah, so the spread is that the 10-year treasury and 30-year fixed rate mortgage. By the way, the reason why it's always 10-year treasury is that even as people take out a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, people find that people don't stay in their home for 30 years. They actually stay in their home for roughly 10 years before moving on. So anyway, that spread, one reason could be this quantitative uneasing. That is to say that Federal Reserve purchased massively mortgage-backed securities. Now they're selling this into the market, so that explains partly some of the wider spread. But when we looked at quantitative uneasing in the past, which happened, the spread did not really necessarily widen to the degree that it has. The other reason is some of the people got really burned, especially the wholesale mortgage lenders, where they purchase mortgages and they have to sell it off. But the Federal Reserve was aggressively raising interest rates so fast, much faster than what market expected, like 75 basis point increases. So many wholesalers lost money, and then now they want to just catch up and trying to compensate for some of the lost money from the Fed surprise rate increases that occurred. And the last reasoning is anytime there's a financial panic, I mentioned about those abnormal widespread. Let me tell you when it occurred. When Lehman Brothers went bankrupt back in 2008, when COVID arrived. So those are a really highly uncertain period. And of course, Silicon Valley Bank going under was also a big surprise, but we had that spread even before the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank. Let's see how that moves, but naturally there is a financial market incentive. People are investing, looking for yields. They say, well, 10-year treasury is offering this, but if I do mortgage-backed securities, it offers a little better and it has government guarantee. So I think there's a natural incentive to go into mortgage-backed securities.
Great, thank you for that. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, so this comes from Steve Hayashi. Do you see any increase of NOT or NOD on commercial properties? Any data shows the commercial mortgage will mature this year?
So you look at the commercial lending, and unlike the residential part, many do not have government backing other than maybe some multifamily. So office, retail, industrial, no government backing, which automatically makes it difficult in a financial market uncertainty. And the second part is much of the commercial lending was done by regional bank, not the big banks for the commercial real estate. So the regional bank, naturally, they're going to try to conserve cash just in case there could be some surprise bank run in their home bank. So they're going to try to conserve some cash, which means that as the refinance comes in, they will say, well, we cannot, the refinancing environment will be a little difficult. So the commercial market, actually, I think it's going to be tough from these few regional banks going under. So residential, silver lining in residential, but on the commercial, it's going to be difficult. And roughly speaking, in any given year, about 15% of the commercial loan value requires refinancing because duration of commercial lending is about 7, 8 to 10 years.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions that we have today. Dr. Yoon, I want to thank you again so much for the time that you allotted to us. A wealth of knowledge. Good luck for the rest of your meetings, and I really hope we get to connect again at the national convention.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yoon.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you all for being here. We actually also have a second part to this. We have Hope Atwell, the CEO of ARIA here, who's going to speak more regarding the current conditions of the market and sort of what and how the data correlates to the State of Asia America report. So Hope, You there?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Gary. Well, it's a hard act to follow, right? I don't think that anybody would want to follow Lawrence after such great information, but really my slides, it's 2 or 3 slides. Last week we were at the Northeast, we were in New York, and we unveiled this year's State of Asia America report. And I just wanted to show really a couple of charts that is part of the report. One actually is not, it's the map for mortgage-ready Asian American and Pacific Islander families and individuals here in the United States, right? And as Dr. Yoon had talked about affordability and home values and all of that stuff, if we overlay that information where Asian Americans are, where the opportunity is, I think folks would be interested in seeing this. And again, this shouldn't take really more than 5 minutes to show. So if hopefully looks like my,
I don't know whether anybody can hear you, but I think you might be cutting out. Is that just me? All right. Well, I think Hope is having a little bit of connection issues right now. So she does have some data that she does want to share with us, but while she gets herself situated, I am going to have to talk about May 17th to the 19th is the ARIA Diversity and Fair Housing Summit. These are the last few days of the $199 registration fee. Since there is only 2 national events, we do expect this to be probably the most attended Diversity and Fair Housing Summit that we've ever had. So, register now before April 2nd, before the price goes up. The website Carrie did put in the chat is aria.org/diversity summit. All right. So while we wait for Hope, it's $199 for members, Carrie said. All right. And for those of you in the chat that have been asking about the recordings and everything like that, so this session was recorded and also Facebook Live. If anybody is looking for a copy of it, please reach out to ARIA National. They potentially can send it to you, so that way you could have it at your next event. But it will also be on the ARIA National YouTube page. All right. And last announcement from me, Hope is not going to be able to come back on. But the ARIA A-list is active. Please go on and apply. It's aria.org/A-list. Since Hope can't come back, I think that is the end of the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. If there's any other topics that you guys would want to see coming out from the Mortgage Committee, please feel free to email me or call or text me. If that's it, thank you guys. Have a great day.